Time now for our political roundtable, and joining us this morning, Democratic analyst Marianne Marsh and Republican analyst Jenny Buckingham. It's great to see you guys as always. Let's start with Brian Shortsleeve. Reaction, Jenny.
You know, what it told me is that he's going to be a very strong candidate and a good candidate. You guys were tough on him. You were pushing back. You were following up. And he stood his ground and stuck to his message. And that's not easy to do as a first-time candidate.
Marianne?
I'm surprised he spent so much time going after Maura Healey and not spending more time about himself. I think this was a great opportunity to introduce himself, and you need to do that if people are going to start to believe the claims you're making, and he made many during this. I think if he gets through the primary, his two biggest challenges in a general election. Number one, he voted for Donald Trump, and he ducked every single time when you guys asked him, would you stand up to Trump? Would you do that? That would be a huge problem in Massachusetts. And the second is he ran the T under Charlie Baker. And when you look at what the great job Phil Lang's done, it exposed him. It's clear, and even in this interview today, he spent more time on the investments and the money and the budgeting versus the people who actually ride it and all the fixes that Phil Lang has done in less than 4 years. So he could have gotten away with it if Phil Lang never got appointed. But here we are.
He can do a lot of more introducing with advertising, etc. But I think to have the skills of a candidate is what you look for now, such as Josh Kraft, who did not have the skills of a candidate.
All right, we've talked about it before. Now it's official. Congressman Seth Moulton is challenging Senator Ed Markey in the Massachusetts Senate primary. The Democratic congressman sharing a video making his announcement, and he pointed directly at Senator Markey's age.
He'll be 86 at the end of his next term if he's reelected, and he's been in Congress for half a century, which is longer than I've been alive.
Well, Senator Markey's campaign responded while Congressman Moulton is launching a political campaign during a government shutdown. Senator Markey is doing his job. He made age the main factor. But he also said he agrees with Senator Markey on a lot of issues. Does he have to do more to differentiate himself, Marianne?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people are running on generational change, but you can't just run on your birthday when the nation is hanging by it's a thread. So you have to do more. And I think the question for Seth Moulton is, are you the Seth Moulton who took out John Tierney, an incumbent, and took him out big? It was so big that you barely saw John Tierney on and off the stage. Or are you going to be the Seth Moulton who got into Congress, tried to get rid of Nancy Pelosi, didn't have a plan to do it, didn't have a candidate to do it, and then you went and ran for president and that didn't work either? That's the choice here, and that's what he's got to figure out.
What do you think?
So I've done some focus groups, small, of my Democratic friends, and they all to a person said, absolutely, we need someone new. He's too old. And I think there's been a shift in how people are thinking about it because of President Biden, and I think it is an issue that's going to work for him.
Well, I was just going to touch on that very point. Joe Kennedy strongly mentioned 6 years ago that Ed Markey was too old.
It's a different, I'm sorry.
My question is it a different climate?
It is, and here's the difference though. Yes, the climate has changed, but the more important thing is the strategy. Remember, Ed Markey defined Joe Kennedy in that race before Joe Kennedy defined himself. And that's what Ed Markey is poised to do with Seth Moulton, unless Seth Moulton gets out there and defines himself more. Otherwise, Markey could repeat it, even though age is a big thing. And that whole issue started here on OTR when Ed asked him the question about his age, and he did not have an answer.
So the Democrats are an emotional lot, right? And they're still really mad that Joe Biden was the candidate and that it was covered up, that he was too old to be the candidate. And I think that is going to animate the Seth Moulton run all the way through.
Well, you know, with Congressman Moulton running for Senate, there is now a scramble underway for his House seat. Some people have already announced their candidacy. Marianne, what do you think the best messaging is? Is it because some of these folks have criticized both Democrats in Congress and the Trump administration?
I think you have to criticize Trump and do cost of living. If you criticize Trump, that's a big umbrella. Everything fits under that because he's broken every law. I mean, the highest crime rate in the country is at the White House. If you then look at the rest of it and talk about cost of living, people want to hear about that too, because the cost of everything's going up, and it's worse now than when Trump put his hand on the Bible, which he didn't, but did take the oath of office and said he'd fix on the first day. That Democrats have to do both.
What do you think, Jenny?
I think message matters, of course, but in this district, geography matters. And I would look for the candidates that come from the part of the district, southern part of the district, with population, with voters, from Peabody, from Salem, from Lynn. And there are a lot of candidates that are running from Andover and elsewhere that don't have the votes. And the candidates that have won, Seth Moulton being one, John Tierney being another, have been from that part of the district.
Well, we talked about it with Brian Shortsleeve. Monica Tibbetts-Nutt is out as Massachusetts Transportation Secretary. MBTA GM and Phil Eng will serve in the interim. By the way, he will only collect his MBTA salary. He will not collect the secretary's salary. And Highway Administrator Jonathan Gulver has been promoted to undersecretary. Her departure, Tibbetts Nutt, comes amid controversies over the rest area contracts and some comments that were made regarding tolls right here on OTR. So, Ginny, is this the best move to replace a controversial cabinet chief with one that's already proven that he can do his job?
I mean, I'll take it first since you said Ginny, even though you're looking at Mary.
Thank you, Ginny.
Look, you want your best person in your cabinet. So Phil Eng is the best person she's got in transportation. You have him in the cabinet. He can't do both jobs. They're both too important. They need to backfill if he's staying. Look, they need to put an end to the controversy. That organization should not be on the front page of the newspaper and all over TV. It's not good for Maura Healey. She knows that she's making a change.
Well, I think you couldn't have another bid process on the rest areas without making a change. And I think Phil Eng is like the good housekeeping seal of approval. Everyone will trust the process, and everyone has faith and trust in Phil Eng in terms of running the overall Department of Transportation. And he's always let his work speak for itself, and he's always delivered the results, and it's the results that has gotten him the respect that he has from everybody, and I thought it was a very smart move by Maura Healey to put him there.
By the way, for the record, I was looking at Jeff, our stage manager. See how much time we have left. But we have time for another
We
question.
should be happy he didn't call you Jack.
Well, I know. Yeah, right. I know. Right.
Small victories.
Exactly.
So President Trump, he is threatening to move World Cup games away from Massachusetts, Boston, one of FIFA's host cities. With the games set to be played at Gillette Stadium in Foxborough, President Trump suggested that parts of Boston had been taken over by unrest. Of course, this is Boston versus Foxborough. Marianne, how should Massachusetts leaders respond to this?
Well, first, wait till Donald Trump realizes that Bob Kraft owns Gillette, his good friend. Second, wait till Donald Trump finds out that Boston isn't Foxborough and Gillette isn't Foxborough. That is like shocking. And last but not least, Donald Trump has no authority to do any of this. Like everything he's done since his first day in office, he has no authority to move the games of the World Cup. So it's another fa-la-la by Donald Trump.
Ginny, Maura Healey, Governor Healey is calling this political theater.
Thank goodness. Like, she's level-headed about it because that's all it is. He can't move the games, but Boston is part of the World Cup. The players are going to be here. The fans are going to be in Boston and Foxborough. So we want to make sure we have a safe city for them to come home to or come visit. And that, I think, is what Short Sleeve talked about. We don't need street takeovers. Let's focus on public safety.
Yeah, I mean, to follow up from last week, I still have questions about whether this was a coincidence or a conspiracy, and I am going to take 10 seconds to read everything that happened on October 11th. 232 civil violations, 74 warnings, 20 criminal summons, 7 arrests, 15 vehicles towed, 2 vehicles seized, and 1 stolen car recovery. Thank you.
We continue on the record. Stay with us.